I can't tell you how much I sympathize with the way everybody has had to endure this unbelievably testing and challenging time. And I know that so many people have had the agony.
An unthinkable betrayal is currently sending absolute shockwaves through the highest levels of the British monarchy. It all began when Princess Anne uncovered deeply unsettling anomalies hidden within the late Queen Elizabeth's final will. What initially looked like a minor administrative error quickly morphed into a chilling realization. Someone had deliberately tampered with the crown's most sacred documents. The prime suspect? Queen Camilla. What followed was a covert investigation that finally forced King Charles to make a devastating, irreversible choice. The royal archives were shrouded in the profound, heavy silence of a late afternoon. Princess Anne sat completely motionless. Reviewing the documents related to her mother's vast estate was not merely legal. It was a sacred duty, a promise of honor made as a daughter, a vow taken as a faithful guardian of the monarchy. Before her lay the original, supposedly untouchable last will of the late queen. It was a document of utmost confidentiality. It held supreme authority. As she turned the thick parchment pages, the Princess Royal's fingers suddenly froze. Her sharp, highly trained eyes narrowed as the glow of the newly lit desk lamp cast long shadows across the room. Guided by the keen intuition of a woman who had witnessed thousands of royal decrees over half a century, she sensed that something was deeply amiss. Suspicion took root in the smallest details. Anne held the heavy document closer to the light and noticed that the ink on several clauses was strangely thick. It possessed a sheen that was entirely inconsistent with the rest of the text. The handwriting should have been her mother's, elegant and decisive strokes that felt familiar. Instead, it bore subtle, almost invisible tremors, as if the writer had nervously tried to mimic the structure of the letters. It was a calculated forgery. More alarming was the royal wax seal in the bottom corner, the very symbol of invulnerability. It had a microscopic hairline fracture, virtually imperceptible to the naked eye, suggesting it had been meticulously pried open and then pressed back together using a highly sophisticated, covert technique. Anne's heart tightened. She delved deeper into the question pages and found the anomalies were not confined to the paper's physical layout. They glaringly manifested in the actual lines dictating the distribution of assets. According to the altered text before her, an array of historic estates had been reassigned, including the late Queen's priceless and deeply personal jewelry collection, heirlooms intrinsically tied to the direct bloodline, representing the true power of the royal house. Yet the document now granted full ownership and discretionary rights directly to Camilla, the current wife of King Charles. The relationship between Princess Anne and Queen Camilla had always been a complex and quiet truce behind palace walls. Decades ago, their intertwined romantic histories created an atmosphere of calculated, icy distance. This tension involved past lovers and unspoken rivalries. Even later, when Camilla officially joined the royal family, things remained strained. When Camilla was crowned queen, Anne maintained a polite but highly detached demeanor, always prioritizing the greater good and fiercely protecting the dignity of her brother, King Charles. However, these new terms contradicted private conversations Anne had shared with her mother. The late queen had always emphasized a strict rule. Legacies of national and symbolic importance must remain within the direct line of succession. This was an unbreakable law designed to secure the stability of William's future throne and protect generations to come. Anne's chest heaved with heavy breaths as her sharp mind raced through a series of earth-shattering questions. Why would a monarch who deeply respected tradition do this? Why would she make a decision that effectively stripped her direct descendants of their birthright? The only logical answer was terrifying, and the only terrifying answer was logical. Someone had maliciously tampered with this sacred document. Silent suspicion turned into overwhelming dread as Anne felt the crushing weight of a dark conspiracy casting a dangerous shadow over the throne itself. She understood that speaking out rashly would ignite a catastrophic media crisis. Doing so without concrete proof could fracture the family's fragile dynamics. The caution and cold rationality of a soldier pulled her back to reality. Slowly, Anne closed the will, the ancient parchment scraping dryly in the quiet room. What had begun as a routine review had now turned into a covert war. The Princess Royal vowed to investigate in absolute secrecy. She would peel back every layer of this treasonous plot to protect the legacy of the crown, no matter who stood behind the conspiracy. Night fell heavily, casting a misty, cold shroud over the sprawling corridors of the palace. In her private study, Princess Anne sat silently before her leather-bound desk. The overhead light cast stark shadows across her face, and her forehead was lined with deep, agonizing thought. Her deeply ingrained caution left no room for careless mistakes. Initiating an investigation without raising the slightest alarm was challenging, so Anne resolved to conduct the preliminary cross-examinations herself. She would seek no external aid until it was necessary. She slowly opened her wall safe and retrieved archived copies of classified royal documents from years past, which included handwritten letters and administrative mandates. All of them bore the late Queen's personal, verified signature. Donning her reading glasses, Anne used a specialized high-magnification lens. She positioned the text side by side beneath the heavy glass. Subtle discrepancies emerged with terrifying clarity. In the older, authentic documents, her mother's penmanship exhibited a natural fluidity. The tail of the letter E always carried a slight but decisive emphasis, a habit formed by someone who had signed thousands of documents over 7 decades. In contrast, the newly added clauses concerning the transfer of the Sandringham estate to Camilla displayed a distinct hesitation. The connecting strokes were weak. The forger had been overly cautious, leaving telltale signs of a hand trembling with guilt and tension. Understanding the stakes, Anne knew she needed confirmation with absolute legal weight, and it had to remain completely confidential. She selected Mr. Allister, a forensic handwriting and ancient document expert who had served the Cabinet Office for over 30 years. Recently retired, his loyalty to the Crown was beyond question, and more importantly, he stood entirely outside the current political currents of the palace. A secret meeting was arranged, disguised as a routine inspection of the conservation status of ancient volumes in the Royal Library, scheduled for the following morning. When Allister entered, there were no pleasantries exchanged. Anne pushed the dark dossier toward him, carefully obscuring the administrative headers and exposing only the questioned passages of text, along with the fractured wax seal. The vast room grew agonizingly silent, broken only by the rustle of turning paper and soft, occasional sighs from the elderly expert. Anne stood beside him, her arms tightly crossed over her chest, and her eyes focused on the shifting expressions on Allister's face. The prolonged silence stretched her nerves to their absolute limit. It felt like hours. When Allister finally looked up, his eyes showed pure shock and deep trepidation. He slowly pointed to the microscopic fracture on the wax seal and to the irregular luminescence of the ink strokes under a portable ultraviolet lamp. Without a word, he gave a helpless, slight shake of his head, confirming Anne's darkest fear. The Supreme Testament had been sophisticatedly and illegally altered after its execution. Once Allister departed under a strict oath of absolute secrecy, Anne sank into her chair, a cold chill running down her spine. The deeper she dug into the altered details, the more she recognized a terrifying pattern, greedy, insidious, and familiar. Every modified section focused heavily on the most historic and highly liquid assets of the royal estate, particularly the management rights of the private trusts responsible for maintaining the symbolic jewelry collections. While organizing a massive pile of comparison papers, Anne's fingers brushed against a small slip of paper hastily tucked into a palace logistics file from a few months prior. This was precisely when the late Queen was convalescing, and access to her private study was strictly restricted. The paper contained a staff scheduling roster approved and signed by Queen Camilla's household department. It detailed an abrupt, unexplained reassignment of guards and showed the movement of confidential secretaries. This occurred on the exact night the will was reportedly moved from the archives to the signing room. Every clue, from the technical anomalies to the timeline, now converged, pointing in one undeniable, horrifying direction: Camilla. That woman's ambition had ruthlessly crossed the boundary of respect for the deceased, violating the ancient laws of the realm. Thinking of her brother, King Charles III, filled Anne with profound sorrow mixed with fierce anger. The monarchy stood on the precipice of a historical scandal that could shake public trust to its core. As she stepped out of the archive room, Anne's gaze hardened. All hesitation vanished, replaced by an iron will to uncover the truth. For weeks afterward, Princess Anne remained immersed in a silent but brutal psychological struggle. She fully leveraged her network of loyalists within the palace, reaching out to veteran courtiers and consulting trusted royal attorneys. She needed to piece together the entire conspiracy. Amid a grueling schedule of official engagements and public appearances, Anne maintained chilling composure. Still beneath it, a brilliant mind worked at maximum capacity, gathering the final damning fragments of the truth. The gathered classified documents revealed a meticulously calculated plot of usurpation, masterminded entirely by Camilla. Since ascending to the rank of queen consort, She had used her ever-growing influence to affect the will's pivotal clauses significantly. Not content with targeting the lucrative Sandringham estate, Camilla also set her sights on the ancestral jewelry collections, treasures of supreme symbolic importance that embodied the dynasty's raw power and direct bloodline. This sophisticated interference aimed to convert these irreplaceable legacies into personal property, granting her independent rights of disposal and preventing them from remaining inseparable assets of the crown. The anxiety gripping Anne's heart was not merely a lament over material wealth. As a guardian of tradition, she perceived a direct, existential threat to the future of the monarchy. The fragmentation of these symbolic assets would fatally weaken the standing of the direct successors. It would establish a dangerous, toxic precedent, one that was unprecedented in British royal history. The sanctity of the institution was being actively destabilized by personal greed. Just as the intense investigation seemed to reach its peak, Anne made her most devastating discovery yet. She stumbled upon a classified audio recording of an internal meeting, accompanied by heavily redacted draft memoranda prepared by Camilla's private secretary. As Anne read through the lines marked highly classified, her heart pounded at the audacious twist. It was a completely unexpected revelation. Camilla did not merely wish to solidify her own financial standing. She was quietly mapping out a plan to secure royal status. She wanted official elevated titles for her two children from her previous marriage, Tom Parker Bowles and Laura Lopes. The disturbing contents of these closed discussions revealed covert efforts to legitimize the presence of the two stepchildren at major national ceremonies. This included aggressive proposals for conferring noble titles, complete with all their attendant privileges. To Anne, this was a severe and unforgivable affront to time-honored principles. Granting royal titles to those with no royal blood was madness. Connecting them to the royal family solely through marriage would shatter the dynasty's sacred boundaries and blur the legitimacy previous generations had dedicated their lives to preserving. Standing before the thick dossier containing this shocking evidence, Anne felt a crushing weight on her shoulders. Every page was toxic. Every comparative photograph was a weapon. Every line of the memoranda read like a brutal and damning indictment against the woman sitting beside her brother at the pinnacle of power. The truth was fully exposed, stark and agonizing. That night, Anne stood motionless in her grand private library, her hands tightly gripping the massive dossier bound in dark blue leather. She understood that the period of silent endurance had finally come to an end. Prolonging this covert investigation no longer served a purpose. The peril loomed too close at hand. A sense of steadfast resolve swelled within the proud princess, and a fierce, uncontrollable determination took over. With eyes burning with conviction, Anne packed all the documents into her briefcase, preparing for a fateful, irreversible step, bringing this entire ugly truth directly to King Charles III, her brother, the man who remained blindly manipulated by sweet, poisonous falsehoods. London's torrential night rain beat relentlessly against the grand glass windows of Buckingham Palace, creating a low, somber murmur. Inside the king's private study, the air felt suffocating. A pin drop would have echoed clearly in the massive room. Princess Anne stood tall before the large mahogany desk, with King Charles III seated behind it. His face was etched with the deep, haunting fatigue of a long day bearing the weight of the state. When Anne placed the dark blue leather briefcase on the desk, she did so with just enough force to produce a dull, ominous thud, signaling the gravity of the matter. With decisive, composed movements, she began to withdraw the documents she had meticulously classified over the past several grueling weeks. She did not rush to speak, she let the silence build the tension. Slowly, she pushed the magnified photographs toward her brother. The altered signatures were glaringly obvious. She presented the ink spectrum analyses from the expert Alistair, and finally slid a pristine copy of the classified staff scheduling roster under his nose, clearly under Camilla's jurisdiction. In this moment, Anne's gaze held no softness of sibling affection. It was sharp and cold, embodying the execution of justice meant to protect the monarchy's survival. King Charles III looked at the documents with skepticism. His brow furrowed, and he tapped nervously on his large desk, a habit he had when dealing with family issues. The relationship between his sister and the queen consort had always troubled him. He thought this was just another unfounded claim, influenced by old biases. Charles pushed the dark folder away, his face hardening with annoyance. He demanded a clear and solid explanation from Anne, making it clear he wouldn't accept baseless accusations against his wife. Undeterred by his reaction, Anne stepped forward and pressed her finger firmly on a photograph of a broken wax seal. Her assertive move made Charles lean in for a closer look. Under the warm light of the desk lamp, he began to flip through the file's pages. Time seemed to stop in the quiet room, while rain pounded the windows outside. With each page he turned, Charles's expression changed. Initial fatigue turned into astonishment, which deepened into shock. The evidence was detailed and undeniable. It revealed discrepancies in ink strokes and included hidden clauses that affected ownership of historic estates. Everything laid bare a harsh truth. Charles's hands trembled as he read about the secret efforts to elevate Tom and Laura's status. This was not mere gossip or palace jealousy. It showed a planned conspiracy to manipulate the late Queen's will and undermine the foundation of the royal family. Charles's chest felt heavy as he realized he had been betrayed by the woman he loved and trusted for years. His shocked gaze reflected his pain. He stared blankly at Camilla's signature on household documents, clear proof of her involvement. Leaning back in his chair, he covered his forehead with his shaking hand, trying to hide the devastation he felt. Anne watched her brother in silence, feeling a pang of sorrow for his pain. But she knew she had to continue. This was a critical moment. After a long silence, King Charles lowered his hand and met the harsh truth with steady eyes. A cold expression formed on his face. He gathered the scattered documents carefully, an action that felt final. In his heart, Charles began preparing for a tough decision that could affect the entire royal family and change Camilla's future. The small reception room in the palace felt heavy with tension. King Charles III sat still behind his grand desk, looking older than his years. Deep wrinkles marked his forehead. The undeniable truth from Anne's dossier had erased the last bit of trust he had in his heart. Faced with a difficult choice between his deep personal feelings for Camilla, which spanned 50 years, and his duty to the crown, the king made a final decision. He set his fountain pen down on the oak desk, the sound heavy and serious. As soon as Camilla entered the room, she sensed a chilling atmosphere. Charles, who usually looked at her with warmth, now had a cold, distant expression. When Camilla saw the dark blue leather folder on the desk, her face changed. She tried to hide her rising panic, and her usual confidence disappeared, replaced by desperation. Camilla moved closer to the desk, her hands trembling as she touched its edge. She began to explain herself frantically, speaking quickly and wildly. She tried to talk about family matters and her loyalty over the years. She insisted that misunderstandings had driven them apart and blamed unseen forces for their troubles. Her eyes filled with tears as she looked at Charles, hoping their past connection would soften his heart. She reached out to take his hand, seeking any sign of warmth. However, King Charles III remained rigid, avoiding her touch. This cold gesture shattered Camilla's hopes. The king's firm decision was clear. He had signed a legal document that removed her from important parts of the late Queen's will concerning royal assets. The rights to the estates and royal treasures were taken away from her and returned to their rightful place in succession. The king did not stop there. He pushed another document toward her, a formal decree that rejected any possibility of royal titles or official status for her two children. Each line of text felt like an immovable barrier, blocking any plans Camilla had for her children's future. Seeing the harsh documents before her, Camilla's attempts to persuade Charles crumbled. She took a step back, her arms hanging limply at her sides and her face turning pale under the lights. The silence from Charles was more frightening than any words could be. A vast, cold distance opened up between them, unprecedented in their long relationship. This was more than just a simple marital dispute. It was a deep divide. It separated a king enforcing justice from a woman whose ambitions had been revealed within the palace. The atmosphere in King Charles III's study was tense after a major upheaval. The final decision was made. Charles understood that as the head of the monarchy, he could not allow anything that might weaken the throne. He had to protect all royal assets, from historic estates to family treasures. These items must only go to the direct line of succession. This was a strong statement about the monarchy's future. It set a clear boundary that no one could cross. In a dark corner of the room, Camilla stood silently, trembling under the weight of her situation. Each new rule stripped her of royal privileges tied to her status. Her access to classified documents was revoked. She could no longer attend important meetings, and her influence over basic decisions was gone. The woman who once held great power now felt like a ghost in her own home. The reality of her situation was evident on the top secret document on Charles's desk. He had decided to separate from her immediately. This decision meant that their daily lives would be completely separate, and Camilla would have no role in state affairs. This was not just a punishment for her actions. It was a strategic move by Charles to protect the monarchy's reputation before any scandal could come to light. From the moment he signed that document, Camilla's future in the royal family changed forever, marked by humiliation. A few days after the crisis, Princess Anne walked through the palace. Her presence was strong and focused, as it had been in the early days of her secret investigation. The morning sunlight poured through the tall windows, highlighting her determined expression. Through careful planning and loyalty, Anne completed her mission. She not only spotted flaws on the will's seal, but also fixed a serious issue that could have threatened the monarchy. In the eyes of the courtiers and the royal line, Anne was a true hero. She protected their traditions and the royal legacy from a greedy conspiracy. The heavy curtain of the palace closed again, hiding the storms that had just passed. The corrections to the will were made official, and the valuable royal treasures were securely stored for future generations. The monarchy continued its long-standing traditions, moving forward without the dark ambitions that had briefly threatened it. This situation served as a harsh reminder of the importance of loyalty. After seeing this unfold, what do you think? Does Princess Anne's investigation and protection of royal traditions show strong duty, or does it reflect a cold, calculated approach as a guardian of the dynasty? Did King Charles make the right choice in taking away his wife's power? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more royal secrets. Also, check out the next video showing on your screen now. You'll enjoy it.